What's happening, YouTube and fellow citizens of the world? Hey, welcome to my channel. This will be my second video. Still learning this process. Hope you'll bear with me and yeah, enjoy the ride. Maybe get to make fun of me a little bit, a little cringe, a little this and that, and hopefully a lot of learning. Hey, I'm putting this video together because I'm a big proponent of personal privacy, and I really think that just complying when we run into situations where personal privacy is at risk, whether we agree with the reasons or not, are sort of something we should all be pushing back against. And what I wanted to do is bring together some ideas surrounding a situation that I personally am finding myself in. And what that situation is, it has to do with the local public schools where I'm at. And where I'm at is actually in Washington State, in Western Washington State. And I'm not going to elaborate on the school exactly for the time being because I don't want to do that necessarily. The people involved are probably just sort of doing their job and are administrating according to what they feel. And I don't know that that's the case, or I don't know that that's not the case. So I won't use specifically any names or anything like that, and I'll just try and stick to sort of the over overshadowing problem that I see. So what it is basically is this has to do with certificate of exemptions regarding childhood vaccination schedules. And I know what you're going to think. Okay, but let's forget the vaccination part. The vaccination part is completely outside actually what I'm at. I don't think there's a lot of people, well, there might be a few, but we can't really argue against the science of vaccination, historically speaking. Of course, there's problems with rushing and getting things on the market too fast, and I would have opinions about that, but that's not what this is. This isn't about the vaccines themselves. Vaccines historically have saved a great deal of people and have been nothing greatly beneficial to our social health overall. Anyway, this isn't about that, but this is about the people or the ability for people to get an exemptions for public schools. And namely what it is in Washington State here, you have a requirement that you have to meet for, I think it's certain grade levels, that you have to have vaccines of certain types by certain periods of times. Otherwise, your child is removed from school. But as a component to this, you can get a certificate of exemption. And that's what I want to hit on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quote a law. Okay, this is Washington State law. Okay, and the law is 28A. It's RCW 28A.210.090. And it has to do with immunization programs and exemptions. Basically what it says is if you object to vaccinations for religious purposes, you can sign a certificate of exemption, okay, provided you belong to a religious organization that believes that they shouldn't be getting modern medical or modern medicine procedures done. You can sign a certificate of exemption, and then you can hand it into the school, and then they can accept that certificate of exemption. But the problem, okay, we go on to the next one. This is still a component of RCW 28A.210.090, is a person can also get a certificate of exemption should they have a personal or philosophical reason for getting, for not wanting to get vaccinated, or, and this is critical, just don't want to share it with the schools for some reason. Okay, they can get a certificate of exemption, but the problem is inside that same RCW 28A.210.090, it creates a different set of rules for people that want to take the personal and philosophical exemption versus people that want to take the religious exemption. If you're a religious exemption, you can sign your own COE and the school will accept it, and that's lawfully allowed. If you're a personal and philosophical uh, exemption, if that's what you want, then you can sign it, but you also have to go find a doctor. Okay, there's a certain criteria, a state licensed clinician of a certain type to sign off on the certificate of exemption before the school will accept it. Okay, and that's inside that same RCW. So we've created a law, okay, inside the state of Washington that differentiates between a religious person and a non-religious person, and it grants an immunity or privilege to these people over this other group of people. And why is that a problem? Well, in Article 1, okay, of the Washington State Constitution, okay, let me open this up here so I get it right. In Article 1, Section 12 of the Washington State Constitution, it says, special privileges and immunities are prohibited. No law shall be passed granting to any citizen, class of citizen, or class of citizens or corporations other than municipal privileges or immunities which upon the same terms shall not equally belong to all citizens or corporations. In other words, what I read from that, and I'm just a dad, just a guy, what I take from that is you cannot create a law that separates or allows one group of people a privilege that doesn't also apply to the other group. And so RCW 28A, as it pertains to vaccination exemptions, allows certain people to go off and sign their own COE, and then that's it. But this other group of people over here have the burden to go find a doctor, to spend money, to travel to set aside the time necessary to go and find a doctor that then is willing to sign a certificate of exemption so that their children can continue school. So this is why I'm taking issue with this. Okay. Now you could say, well, we just go to the doctor or you just go do this. That's fine. Okay, but that law should be applied to both sides. And I'm not arguing for that fact. I do think that if a person just doesn't want to do it, they can say, I'm going to accept the liability, and you know what? I just don't want my children to do that. Or more importantly, I just don't want to tell you. I just don't want to tell the school or tell the state that they are or are not vaccinated. I'm going to keep stewardship of my family's private information to myself, and I just don't want to share it with anybody. Now, in creating this law, okay, they've created a privilege for a certain group of people, all right, and an immunity to them, but they've forced this other group of people to bear the responsibility and burden. And this is important because now I have to spend money out of my own pocket to go try and find a doctor, to travel to it, right, and do all those things. And even then, okay, this same law that provides for these exemptions that surrounds this problem, it doesn't require doctors to sign for people. Okay, so it's quite possible that I could go visit my first doctor, okay, and they say, nah, I'm just not going to sign it. Okay, so now I have to spend additional money, go find an appointment over here, and then, oh, this doctor says, nah, I'm just not going to sign it. So there's no lawful, compelled reason why they would sign it. So it is feasible that through this discriminatory law, they've created an unattainable path for parents and families that want to take it. Okay, now they've made room for it, but the circumstances around it don't come into play. Now, what's interesting is because I actually contacted my local public health department because I don't believe I should be required to furnish the cost of a state requirement when it's my right as a parent to make that choice, you know. So I went to the public health department. I said, look, why aren't you providing me counseling for a certificate of exemption? And they said, well, we just don't do that. And I said, okay, great. But you do understand that the law is discriminatory, right? Why is it you're only providing for vaccinations? You could walk in and you can get a vaccine for a child, for all kinds of stuff. Whatever it is you want a vaccine against your children, you can go ahead and do it. But when it comes to certificate of exemptions, the public health department is nowhere to be found. Now, I brought this up to my local health department and I said, look, what's up? And they actually responded, okay, which was very surprising to me. They said, okay, you're right. There is a disparity and a gap in service, which is exactly the words they said. We're going to write a new policy that allows our clinicians to sign certificate of exemptions for families that need it. Okay, great, that satisfies it. But the problem, okay, and this is sort of my personal problem. The problem I'm running into now is the local schools here has decided that I've run out of time. And I'm like, well, the local public health department recognized that there's a disparity in this policy. They're working to make a new policy, which is going to take time. Okay, it's got to go through the machinery of that agency and be generated and reviewed lawfully, and then it's got to come into fruition. And it needs time to take that. But the school is saying, well, it doesn't matter. Your son, if he's not met the requirements, the path to comply, as the superintendent put it, the path to comply, love that. You must follow our paths to comply, citizen prole. Anyway, if you don't follow the path, you have only until, well, it's only like a couple weeks, well inside the length of time it's going to take for that policy to come effect. Otherwise, my child's going to be kicked out of school. So basically, I can't find a certificate of exemption through public service means. All right. I have contacted local resources numerous times. They've recognized the disparity, and yet here my local school, the public school, mind you, is not willing to allow that time to happen so that I can get a certificate of exemption through the public health department without having to go through my own expense and travel probably to Eastern Washington to find a doctor willing to do something like this. Now, what's the issue? The issue is my son's going to lose out on education, and I'm potentially facing, other ramifications because of that. Even though these circumstances are not beyond my control, and this school is enforcing this discriminatory law in the first place. We got to watch this stuff. You've got to fight back against it. This is making me extremely uncomfortable, and I hate it. But I recognize the importance of it because someday my son and my daughter are going to face these same problems, and I want their energies to be focused on solving the problems they're presented with. And I'm going to spend my time and energy right now trying to make sure they have less to deal with, so that they can be stewards of their family's privacy and their rights individually on their own. And I think all of us should. It's not about vaccination. This is about privacy, right? This is about making sure that our children later on down the road still have their right to privacy. They can still make their own health choices because we don't want, things forced upon them or forced upon their children, because God only knows if it's one thing now, what's the next thing going to be? And if they're allowed to discriminate in this one unchallenged area, what's to say they can't discriminate in the next? And so these are these important battles and it is a battle, these are these important battles that we have to fight as parents. Anyway, that's some quick thoughts on that. Look up RCW 28A.210.090, and then we'll look up the Washington State Constitution. There's some other stuff in there that you could say it violates as well, but I think that's the number one, and people just let it happen. Man, I think we should stop letting it happen, even if we agree with the underlying principles behind the idea. Encouraging vaccinations, all super great. I actually do support that. I don't support forcing it. And I certainly don't support I certainly don't support when a state wants to intrude on personal privacy and personal health matters of the family. Absolutely not. It's it's a no-brainer to me. Anyway, ciao for now.